I bet this is something you have done before, have considered doing, or are about to do. Is going through your partner's phone without them knowing ethically right? Here is what two ancient voices would say. Let me start with Plato because he gives us a framework for understanding what happens inside a person when they cross a line like this. Plato believed the human soul has three parts: reason, which wants to understand; spirit, which wants to act honorably; and appetite, which just wants what it wants. When someone reads their partner's messages without permission, Plato would ask which part of the soul is driving the action, and the answer is clear because reason would have asked directly and spirit would have respected the boundary. So what is left is appetite wanting to know without caring about the cost of getting that knowledge. Plato also believed that every time a person lets appetite override reason and spirit, they are not just committing a single wrong act, but are actively reshaping their own soul by training themselves. The first time someone sneaks a look, they feel guilt, but by the 10th time the guilt starts to fade, and by the 100th time they might not feel anything at all. The real damage of reading your partner's messages is not whether you find something incriminating, but whether you become someone who crosses boundaries quietly and then tells yourself it was self-defense. Do that enough times, and sneaking becomes a habit. The habit becomes character, and character becomes who you actually are when no one is watching. Think about what that means for the rest of your life and for the relationships you build. Plato would ask you a simple question. Do you want to be the kind of person who needs to check up on the people you love? And do you want to build a relationship where your peace of mind depends on surveillance rather than trust? Once you start down that road, turning back is very hard because you will always find a reason to wonder and always find a reason to look again. And each time you look, you will find either nothing, which will not actually reassure you because suspicion feeds on itself, or something, which will break you. So there is no outcome where sneaking produces the lasting safety you are looking for. Now let me bring in Confucius because he looks at the same act from a completely different angle, focusing on the relationship itself rather than just the individual soul. Confucius believed that trust is not a feeling that you either have or do not have, but is instead a structure built from thousands of small acts of ritual respect performed over time. Knocking before you enter a room, turning away from a screen that belongs to someone else, choosing not to look even when looking would be easy and no one would know. These small acts seem insignificant on their own, but together they form the entire architecture of a relationship. What Confucius understood that we often forget is that a relationship is not built in grand gestures like anniversary dinners or expensive vacations, but in the small moments where no one is watching and you still choose to act with integrity. Like when you put the phone down instead of picking it up, or when you ignore the message that popped up on the lock screen, or when you hand the phone back without looking because you understand that whatever is in there is not your business and does not need to be. Reading your partner's messages without their knowledge is not just one isolated act, but is a crack in that carefully built architecture. And Confucius would say that even if your partner never finds out, you have still changed because now you know something you were not given and have seen something you were not invited to see. That knowledge sits between you and your partner, invisible but real, making the next act of trust a little harder and making the next suspicion a little easier. And the crack spreads a little further each time you choose to look instead of choosing to ask. Confucius would also point out that the act of sneaking does not happen in a vacuum, but always responds to something real, whether that is a partner who has given you genuine reason to doubt, or a wound from a past relationship that you are carrying into this one, or simply the fact that no one ever taught you how to have a hard conversation because our culture does not teach that skill very well. The solution to a crack in trust is not more surveillance, which only deepens the crack, but is instead repair, and repair requires talking out loud, naming the fear, asking directly, and accepting the answer even when the answer hurts. Sneaking is the refusal to have that conversation because sneaking says, I would rather know in secret than risk hearing the truth out loud. And that refusal is itself a choice that damages the relationship from the inside. Both traditions agree on one central truth, even though they approach it from different directions. The question is not whether you find something when you look through the phone, but who you become in the looking and what kind of relationship you are building while you look. Plato asks you to look at your own soul and consider whether you are becoming someone governed by appetite and whether you are training yourself to cross lines more easily each time. Confucius asks you to look at your relationship and consider whether you are building a structure of trust or cracking it from the inside, with every small choice to look instead of to ask.